Thanks for jumping in, everybody that's already in the webinar. We're going to give it just a few minutes to grab a few more people before we begin. All right, it looks like we're getting a few more people joining. We'll just give it one more minute and we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get this going. First of all, thanks everybody for joining the Spec-Rite Contractor Webinar. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing on how Spec-Rite Online can help you maximize your revenue and productivity. And we're also going to be offering all attendees today a free month of our job scheduling and retro-reflectivity add-ons. If you haven't met me, my name is Ben Zemmel. I'm the product manager of Spec-Rite. And I'm sure most of you know Perry Cooper, our other panelist here. He's our customer success specialist. In just a moment, I'll be passing this over to Perry to present. But I just want to remind everyone here that we want this to be an interactive experience. So if at any time you have a question or a comment, please type it in the chat below. I'll be monitoring the chat as Perry presents, and we'll be sure to address all of the questions during or after each section of the presentation. With that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Perry.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. To kind of elaborate a little bit more, what we'll be starting with here today is the project management capabilities that are now available inside of Spec-Rite Online. And then once we've covered those from end to end, we will pause for a little bit of questions, answer those, move into the reflectivity side of Spec-Rite Online, tackle questions, and open that up for any outstanding questions y'all might have. So we'll go ahead and get my screen shared with y'all, and we'll start rocking and rolling here. So, the end-to-end process I'm talking about when it comes to project management is going to be really just creating the job when the job is born, all the way to closing out the job once it's been fully completed. Once we've covered that, we'll move into the three pieces of reflectivity that is creating and uploading retro files, viewing data in SkyView, so populating it and also overlaying it, getting the actual insights from both your reflectivity and your application data, and then finally, the generation of retro reflectivity reports. So we'll just really jump into it to start here inside the portal. And really, what this will do is take your jobs page primarily from a static list into a fully living organism. So what we'll do when it comes to the first bit of project management is we will create a new job. So we've got this new jobs button, as most of y'all are aware, where you can create a job, send that to the truck, and then manage it inside the portal. So in this particular instance, we're going to use I-81 Dickinson to Carlisle. We project that's going to start on July 6th once we get back from the break. And now that job is available for us in the portal. Since it hasn't been worked on yet, it's going to be on our upcoming page, just like the rest of the jobs we haven't worked on yet. And you can see here, we can actually go into our jobs dashboard using our job dashboard button and start to really customize the life of that job. So there's a few things going on here. We'll work through them left to right and talk about what you can do on each individual bubble. First, we've got a weather widget here. That way you can get this information at a glance without having to navigate outside the portal or open up that weather app on your phone. You can see the week in advance. This should be very familiar from what you see on the dashboard when you'll log in every time. This is going to be the usage and distance widget. That way you can look at the full life of a job, a particular date range, and if you have multiple pieces of equipment working on that job, you can filter by each piece of equipment. To the right, we see our map. So there's two things we can do here. We can see the live truck location, but we can also add meeting location. So that's one of the points of confusion when it comes to getting everybody out to the job site. We can cut that out by providing this information to everyone that's going to be associated with this job. So here, if we want to change that, we can either click the add meeting location button and type in a address, or we can just check the click a location on the map. So if we wanted them to meet right over here, we could actually just drop that, hit add location, and that would now update. You can also see real-time activity on this particular section here. This will populate once we add a truck and a crew here, but we can actually see, just like we do in the dashboard, the name, the crew members, the status of the truck, the performance rates in real time, and the speed. So next, we would actually just want to go ahead and add our crew. We've got our long line thermo blue team here that we're going to add, and since we've got a truck and people associated with this crew already, it's going to pre-populate the truck, our demo truck 4, and our two crew members, Mitch and Andy. Now, if we need to add any additional folks to this crew, maybe we want to add in a driver, that way Mitch and Andy can both run guns at the same time. We can do that. We can grab Megan, add her as a driver here, and she'll now be associated with this job as well. Now, probably the biggest piece of being able to manage and really oversee this job is going to be our progress by line type. So what we can actually do here is start to add in line types and the footage that are going to be associated with them based off the let that you've gotten. So we can come in here and say we know that we're going to have we're going to have 1,000,000 feet of double solid yellow. We're going to have 500,000 feet of left solid edge line. And then we'll add our white patterns here. In this case, it's just going to be white solid edge line. And we've got 1,000,005 of that. So once we've added those line types in, we can edit them at any time in case we forgot to add a 0 in there or missed one. But this will help you as the data starts coming back into the Spec-Rite online portal from the truck. This will actually track your progress in a percentage format here for each individual line type, but also your overall progress as you work toward completion on that job. And this will have a lot of implications when it comes to managing your schedule, being able to consult the schedule to shift things around, but also just being able to say, this job's been done. Let's run our end of life report and start working on the invoice. Now we have a notes section here in case you need to communicate any mission critical information, but this will also populate any comments that have been added from the SRO mobile app or the DL18 HDVO device on the truck. So if the crew is noting anything that's happening on that job, it will be kicked back here to the portal. That way you have visibility on it as well. But we're going to enter our notes. So since we've got our thermo crew, we want to make sure they are reloading before they leave the yard, just confirming the job name and the real-time alerts are set up on the DL18. They're purging the guns pre and post application. And when they're purging, they enable auto test mode so it doesn't kick back any of that purge data into the Spec-Rite online portal. We can also attach files. So there's any mission critical files you want to add, pictures, job documents that need to be communicated to anyone associated with this job. You can add them here and they can be included in any communication that you use through the Spec-Rite online portal. And if you have any contacts that you want to add, maybe it's the project engineer, or if you're the subprime on a paving job, you can actually go ahead and add those in. So we'll just add our project engineer. He should be pretty familiar to most of y'all. And then once we've got him added in, that contact will now be able to be included on our job overview, and anyone associated with this job can get their contact information should they need to connect with Mr. Project Engineer. And we also keep an activity log of anything that's done on this job. So if you ever update the job, you add notes to it, you can always go back and see if anything's been deleted or removed. That way, in case it needs to be added back, you can always make sure that the appropriate information is associated with this particular job. Once we've got everything filled out and set up for this job, we can go back to generate summary up here in the top right. And this is a summary that you can download. You can print it off directly to your printer. And this is fully customizable by using the checkboxes here, but it's really just a document that communicates all the information that we've added to this particular job to anyone that needs it. So it has all the crew members, the people, the contacts, the equipment, any of the notes, and you can see exactly what that looks like if you hit print here. And this is just good, like I said, to be able to communicate any mission critical information we have associated with this job to anyone that needs it. So once we've got our job filled out, it's now about scheduling that job. So we want to make sure that this job gets done in a timely manner, gives us enough time to run our retros at the end of it, and that way we can get that invoice off as soon as possible and move on to the next one. So when it comes to scheduling, you'll click this button up here, and you can see that we have our scheduler configuration on the left-hand side. We have some more customization, and then we'll see the dates once we actually get those scheduled here on the right-hand side. So let's say we got a big mobilization fee for this one. We want to get out there and do it as soon as possible. We know we're all going to break next week for the 4th. So we want to get this job started on the 7th. And since it's got about 3 million linear feet associated with it, we'll say it's going to take us about 2 to 3 weeks to do. So we'll have this end on the 28th, and then we can pick the days that we want this job to actually be worked on and scheduled. So we'll say this is going to be worked on from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, each day of the week until the 28th of July. Once we apply that to all dates, it'll actually show us here what our start and end times are. And this can be changed, updated, or edited at any time. That way, in case the, ever accurate folks over at the weather station give you a wrong forecast and you get rained out one day, maybe you get rained out on the 8th, you could easily change that to the 9th if you need to. And then we have a color association here. Once you're ready to schedule that, this is the color that will reflect on the schedule. The two ways that I see this mostly used is either on a per crew or a per job basis. So that way, if you did this on a per crew basis, you could see everything on your calendar that's blue. You know it's going to be your long line thermo blue crew here. Or you could do it on a per job to kind of track the actual jobs that are being worked on. But once we hit save schedule, this will be applied to our schedule. And this is the whole point of having a scheduling feature inside of the SRO portal. So we have a scheduling conflict that you can see here. So we have two jobs that are particularly going to be blocking this job from being scheduled without any other overlap, whether that's crew members or individual people. We can go back and edit this, or we can ignore it. Now, we don't want to just make sure we're throwing stuff at our schedule, so we're going to go back and edit. And what we want to do here is consult our actual schedule. So you'll have this calendar tab over here on the left-hand side, and we can start to look at our calendar in advance. So if we start to look into the month of July, we wanted to start that job on the 6th when we got back. However, we have this job here, our city works, being done by our long line paint crew, which is the red team, and we can see Megan's already associated with that. So we're going to need to pull Megan off the schedule for the long line blue team, the thermo truck. And then we also have jobs here that are already scheduled for the 7th, for the 14th, that are blocking our Dickinson job from being done on I-81. So what we want to do now that we know exactly what our blockers are, we go back to our jobs page, we find the job that we're looking for, and we can take Megan off that crew as the first step. So we'll remove Megan. That clears one of the blockers, but this is where we really start to use our jobs page and our upcoming jobs tab as a living organism to determine when we're actually going to schedule these jobs for. So we know that we had the Breezewood Gapsville job as a blocker. We can go in here and look at that. We can see here that this job is only centerline, and we only have 400,000 linear feet to do here. So we know this job is a little bit shorter. We can maybe get this knocked out in 1 to 2 days or 1 to 2 shifts. So if we go back to our jobs table or back to our jobs table, check our calendar, we know that we have a free day on June 29th. And here what we're going to do is schedule that centerline job on I-70 on Monday, June 29th. That way we can get that knocked out. When we get back after the 4th, we can just go ahead and start working on our I-81 job. In order to do that, we'll just go back to our jobs page, go to our upcoming tab, find that centerline job on I-70, click the jobs dashboard, and open up the schedule. So like I said, you can edit this at any time, whether it be from the right-hand side or the left-hand side. So what we'll want to do is, since we are confident we can get this knocked out all on Monday, June 29th, we'll change this from June 29th, set the end date as well to June 29th, hit apply, enable that, and make sure we have the time that we desire here. So this can be knocked out in 6 hours from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. We save that on our schedule, and now that blocker is cleared. So if we go back to our jobs table in our upcoming tab, we can find our I-81 job and now make sure that when we are scheduling this job in advance, start date on Monday the 6th, end date on the 28th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We can apply that to all dates. Hit save. Oh, I got one more to clear. That's Wednesday. So if I hit save, oh, we still got Megan here. All right. So now if we go back in here, again, change to 6, end date 28th, Monday, Tuesday. We can apply that to all dates, hit save, and we will be able to schedule this on the calendar. It looks like it's not taking Megan off. Oh no, we did take Megan off. Okay. So we've now cleared that blocker. If we go back to our calendar, we can see here for the month of July, we've got our Dickinson 81 job ready to go as soon as we get back from from the 4th of July holiday. You can also look at this from a week at a glance. So if you want to get a real idea of what the hours are for each crew working, we can see here we've got our blue long line thermo team. We've got we've got 10 hours allocated for Monday and Tuesday for a total of 20, and then we've got another 6 hours for Thursday and Friday for a total of 32 hours. So maybe there's another 8 hours we can assign them to a different job, whether that be on Sunday, Wednesday, or Saturday, to make sure we're getting the most out of our schedule. Now, there are some setup things that you will need to do in order to make sure that you're able to add crews and add people to individual jobs. And that's going to be done here on your options page under the user management tab. So this user management tab will allow you to invite team members, but it will also allow you to manage your crews. So if you wanted to add a new crew, you could start from scratch by giving it a name, adding in the team members, and associating them with a piece of equipment. If you wanted to edit any of the ones we currently have, like the long line blue thermo team, we could go in there, remove Andy or Mitch if we needed to, assign them to another truck, hit save, and make those changes there. Anybody that you want to have access to the scheduling side of things will need to have this project scheduling box checked. And we do have some roles here that you can assign to different team members. So if you're looking to give the crew permissions to SRO, but you don't want them to have full access to, edit or create jobs, delete templates, things like that, you can set them as a member. That way they can still view reports and Skyview to see what's been done, and they can kind of stay on the same page as everybody else using those and the jobs dashboard. And that puts a bow on everything we have for the project management side of things inside of Spec-Rite Online. Ben, I'll pass it back to you for any questions we have.
Thank you, Perry. Yeah, we don't have any questions yet, but I invite everybody to, if you have any lingering questions on project scheduling, any additional information you want to know, please go ahead and enter them into the chat below. We'll give it just a moment for those. All right, Perry. So we have a question from Jean 14 about, so he's asking, where does it show up in the DL18? And maybe you can explain that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So once we've got everything built out, we've got it set on the schedule, we can actually send that I-81 Dickinson job to the truck here from the portal. That way they don't have to go through the steps of manually creating that job and making sure it's named the exact same way inside the portal or on the truck as it is in the portal. So, Jean, what we can do is we can check the box here for I-81 Dickinson Carlisle, click our transfer name to truck button, Send it to our long line thermo crew, the blue team, Andy and Mitch, by clicking Demo Truck 4. Hit upload, and that job will be sent directly from their truck. That way, when they go back to the jobs list on that truck, they can just pick that as a readily available selection.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And thanks, Perry. We have another question here from Michael Jacob. He wanted to know, how do you account for double solid lines on a project?
Yeah, so if we go back into, we'll use our Dickinson Carlisle job here. And if we go back into our line type progression tracker, we can pick the different patterns here. So the way we account for that is we just grab this yellow solid center line. So if we're doing double solid yellow, if you have double solid white, we can also grab that here as well. And all of that information, the way it's accounted for is since that pattern is associated with the data coming from the truck to SRO, we're taking the footage that's been associated by the truck, putting it into this job, and then saying, okay, we know that we've done 500,000 feet of the million feet that we need of double solid yellow. That would show us the 50% in that case. Does that answer your question, Mike?
I'll wait for a reply. If you have any remaining questions, please do throw those in there. Just one more opportunity for people to ask some questions before we move on to the next section. We'll give it like 30 seconds here for additional questions. Uh, Mike said yes, that did answer his question.
Perfect. And I guess, yeah, just one more thing on that as well is the way that the patterns are selected on the truck is that's just something that they select on the SC12, the actual switch boxes on the left and the right hand side.
All right. It looks like we don't have any other questions, so we'll go ahead and pass back to Perry to start the next section.
Yeah, so the next section we've got is reflectivity. So there's going to be three key pieces here that we'll focus on. First is going to be getting the job, the reflectivity data inside the SRO portal. We'll stay here on the jobs page to demo that. Then we'll jump into Skyview to show how to populate the data, overlay that with your application data, and start to actually glean some insights from what you're looking at. And then finally, we'll show you the generation and the types of reports that you can run with your reflectivity data. So here on your jobs page, you'll have this little retro tab over here on the right hand side of the selections in the top left, and you'll see we have this button called Upload Retro. So this mirrors exactly what you see on your jobs page for application data. It's got a running list of all the application data that you've uploaded into the portal. And to get a job into the portal, what we'll do is upload retro here. Now, the biggest thing that is absolutely critical when uploading reflectivity data is that you follow this naming schema. So what we set out is project, route, direction, line type, and color. When it comes to project and route, you have a little bit of flexibility on how you want to use these. So if you wanted to use a contract number under project, you can do that. If you wanted to use a road name under route, you can easily do that as well. Direction needs to either be, north, east, southwest. You have your line types there, and then you have your color, yellow or white. So that's the naming schema we want to make sure that we're following when we're uploading a file. But to actually upload the file, we'll go ahead and here, go to our reflectivity files and grab one down here at the bottom that just makes everything easier. Let's see here. Let's grab a nice easy one here. So, and one of the big things when it comes to this naming schema is that this right here is going to determine also the filters that you can use, whether it's in your Skyview or in your reports. So we've got a D3 under our project here. We've got our route as US 38, direction, line type. Since this is listed as deck, we want to make sure this is changed to the correct terminology we want to use for line type. So in this case, this is going to be center line. We'll put edge line since it's white. And then once we give this a name, we can hit submit, and this job will now be available for us to use when it comes to Skyview and reports inside your SRO portal. And that'll list out here for you on your jobs page if you ever need to find it. It will be in reverse sequential order, so it'll be there at the very end. But the next piece to look at is Skyview. So this is probably the most visually appealing part of your reflectivity data. And what we want to start doing to populate this is just like what we do for application data. We're going to start with adding a layer. So when we add this layer, this is what it normally looks like. And what we'll want to do is change this box from application to reflectivity. And when, just like for our application data, we want to pick out our time range at the very highest level. We're going to look at everything we've collected for this year. And then we have a few different options. Like I said, this is where it becomes absolutely critical to make sure that our project route, job name, direction, and line types are set up the way that we want them to be. That way we can use these to filter the data on the map. So you can really start here by using a project. You can use a job particularly, or if you want to look at a specific route, we can do that. You can type in here. I'm going to look at particularly Route 8. So here's where you can actually select which type of data populates on the map. We'll just grab everything for our first example. So we want everything that is, whether it passed or failed, hit apply, and now we can see everything here on Route 8. So we've got a variety of colors indicating whether that data was pass or fail. And each one of these little dots, we can actually hover our cursor over it and it'll tell us exactly what that was. So we can see here, this is a yellow center line. The reflectivity average was 147, which was below our given threshold of 250. And we can see the project and the file and job name that this specific point is associated with. We can look one step further. So if we just want to look at a particular color and pattern, let's say we just want to view our white edge line, we could hit apply. And now all the dots here are going to reflect white edge line readings as it pertains to Route 8. We'll have some job details that you can pop out over here once we start to populate the application data with it. But when it comes to populating your application layer, this is where you want to make sure that you have a lot of congruency between your reflectivity file job names and your actual application data job name. So making sure you just mirror that same job name across both data types is going to be huge. So if I go in here, I can grab everything for application data that was done in the month of January, since our readings were done at the end of January. And then I can find that Route 8 job. So if I just want to pop in our Route 8 job listed under Demo 2, we can go in here, hit apply, and now see all of the application data associated with this particular job and the reflectivity readings. Now, one thing we want to make sure we're looking at the same bit of data. So our reflectivity data is just pertaining to white edge line. If we want to make sure that's the same across our application data, we can click the pencil. And since we have a job name populated, we can just pick out the white data, and we can also find our solid edge line data here. So if I reapply, now we're looking at the same exact type of data across reflectivity and application. And we can start to see the areas that either passed or failed for these particular lines as we kind of scroll through the map. But when it comes to actually looking here, you're probably wondering, okay, I have yellow, I have red, I have green. Why do I have yellow and red? Well, we can actually start to understand that if we go back to our application layer and change our view from pattern to performance. So this is where we can start to see exactly how well our mill thickness was hit, our bead rate was hit in pounds per gallon, and we can really start to uncover some of the why behind these particular failings or passing readings. So in this case, we're really just curious about the readings that failed. So what we can do here is just look at readings in application data that didn't pass our mill thickness or our bead application targets. And we can also make sure that our reflectivity data is showing the same thing. So now we're just looking at areas of failure, and we've got our lines that show here exactly where those readings were and the data associated with it from your application side. So one thing you can do now is we can actually say, okay, this particular segment here had a reading of 123, 79, and 101. Why is that? Well, if we click into our particular line here, this segment, we can open up our job details and actually see our performance here, that our bead rate was incredibly low, below our target of 7 pounds per gallon. Our mill thickness was a little bit over our 15 mil target. However, really the ultimate reason that this particular segment failed, we can pin that on our particular bead rate. So this is just one of the ways you can get some of these insights as the why behind some of the what's when you're looking at your data inside of Spec-Rite Online, and particularly using the map visuals inside of Skyview. The last thing to look at is going to be reports. So just like your application reports, we have retro-reflectivity reports available for you, and it mirrors the same exact functionality that you'll use to create a application report. So on this retro tab here, we have a running list of all of our retro reports. We can actually go in here and create a new report. If you want to use the standard template for reflectivity that tells you exactly what the readings were and where, you can use the default templates. Again, we'll want to make sure that our date ranges are accurate here when we're running reports. So we've got everything that we've collected for this year. We're going to give this a name. We'll call Route 8 since that's what we were looking at in Skyview. And then again, this is another reason why the naming schema is critical for being able to view your data in SRO. So we can actually look at different jobs. We can look at a project overall, or we could look at a particular route. So if we change this to route, we were looking particularly at Route 8. I can go grab Route 8, hit save, and that report's going to be generating in the background. And that would just be an example of our default template, but we do have a lot more insightful templates that you can use, mainly being the retro cost report. And this will actually allow you to enter some fields, fill out some criteria, and it'll give you an idea of areas and what the cost could be to but potentially to restripe those areas from a material standpoint. So again, here we're looking for a particular route, Route 8. I can scroll to the bottom, find Route 8, make sure I've got that selected, and then we can enter some of the criteria that's going to be needed to make sure that we're getting an accurate estimate as to what it's going to cost us to restripe this road. So everything that we were putting down on Route 8 was 4-inch. We were looking at a material thickness target of 15. None of the information we were looking at was skip, so we can put 0 in skip and 0 in gap. And we know roughly we'll say, a gallon of water base, we'll say that's about $45 a gallon. We'll want to make sure that our material unit is set to gallons. If you are looking at thermo application data, you can use, pounds and enter the density that's associated with that here. But once you've got everything filled out, you can now run this report by hitting save, and you'll get a retro cost report that'll break down exactly each reading and what it could cost you to restripe that particular route. So I've already gone ahead and run one of those. That way we don't have to wait on it to generate. And it's going to look very, very similar to this. So what we can see here is that we could see all of the areas that were passing or failing. If any area was passing, it's going to have a 0 because we know it's not going to cost you anything to restripe that particular section. But then we've got it broken out using the information we entered there in the report generator to show us what it could potentially cost us for each one of these failed readings. And like you saw here at the very bottom, it'll give you a grand total as to what you could be looking at to restripe that road from a material cost standpoint, not factoring in other things, like labor, mobilization, gas, things like that. And we can see this particular system, Route 8, we're looking at potentially 37,000 and some change to restripe that road just in materials. So that's the example of one of the insightful reports you can run inside of Spec-Rite online for your reflectivity data. And yeah, Ben, I'll pass it back over to you for questions.
Thank you, Perry. Yeah, so we don't have any questions quite yet, but I want to give our attendees just an opportunity to go ahead and ask those. Like I mentioned before, you should have chat down below that you can post those questions in. We'll get them answered right here. And it doesn't look like we have any retro-reflectivity questions yet, but I want to go ahead and open it up for just general questions. If we have any questions about retro-reflectivity, anything else we've discussed today, or SRO in general. We'll give it just another minute. I don't want to cut anybody off if they're typing. We do have a question here from Jean. He was asking about do you need to rework retro data? I might need. I'm not sure if do you have a context for that, Perry?
I'm assuming that might be something pertaining to like the raw files. So, oh,
Depending on the machine that you used. Yes, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
yeah, so we have a lot of different file types that are already ingestible inside of Spec-Rite Online. So, I mean, that's correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. Delta, help me out a little bit here. I'm blanking on
Yeah,
the
we can
exact.
we currently support Delta units, we support LaserLux units, we support um RetroTech units, and your Road Vista is LaserLux. Yeah. Yeah. So we support most units. If you have a unit that isn't one of those brands, we can support it very quickly. We just need a sample file from you.
Thanks, Ben.
Mhm. Yeah, and thank you, Jean, for that question. Any other final questions? All right. It looks like we've gotten everything answered. We really appreciate everybody attending today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Perry or I directly. Um, I do want to also say, so first of all, everybody here gets a month of both add-ons if you want them. We'll be following up with some communication immediately after this. You should get something within the next hour with instructions to get those trials if you'd like. I also wanted to say that I know that we had some users from agencies that attended, and some of this might not apply to you, but we actually are hosting an agency webinar coming up on July 9th. So look out for an email about that. But yeah, that's all we've got. And thanks, everybody. We did have just one remaining question from Jean. He was asking if these are additional to the SRO subscription. The answer is yes. These are both add-ons. And there is an additional cost for those. But like I said, we'll give you a month to try them out, see if they work within your workflow. And if you have any questions about those, please do reach out to us. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.